and the civil servants of the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sports here with us today. We have established a quorum of 9 members. Can we please stand for a moment of silence? I have received notice of absence from MP William Marlin and notice of lateness from MP Grisha Heilige Martin, and also notice of absence from MP Emmanuel. I look to the floor of Parliament. Is there anyone who wishes to give a notification? I see no need. We have as agenda point for this meeting of today the discussion with the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sports regarding ideas for improvement, further development, and legislation of these sectors on St. Maarten, IS 1133, 2021-2022, dated July 12, 2022. Agenda point 2, discussion with civil servants of the Ministry of ECYS regarding the establishment of a National Heritage Week, a plan regarding the creation of a cultural council, and the setting up of a multidisciplinary work group to review school curricula per the adopted motion number 1 of January 21st, 2022, IS 1206, 2021-2022, dated August 17, 2022. Agenda point 2 was requested by members of Parliament Melissa Gumbs, MP Ludmila de Weever, and MP Solange Duncan. We now go over to agenda point 1. The Committee of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport Affairs of Parliament in its meeting number 8 of Friday, June 24, 2022, met with members of the St. Maarten Youth Parliament to discuss their ideas for legislation, improvement, and further development of the education, culture, youth, and sports sectors on St. Maarten. At the end of the meeting, the committee agreed that a report based on what was brought forward by the Youth Parliament be sent to the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sports. The points brought forward by the Youth Parliament can be found in IS 1099, 2021-2022, dated June 27, 2022. This document was also shared with the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport. The committee also decided that the Minister be requested, based on Article 28 of the Rules of Order for Parliament, to allow civil servants of the Departments of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport to attend a meeting of the committee to discuss the topics as brought forward by the members of the St. Maarten Youth Parliament. These documents can be found on the general themes of Parliament, hence today, this meeting. I would now like to give the floor to the Honorable Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, Dr. Anders Rudolph Samuel, for his introductory remarks and his presentation. Minister, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, thank you. Good afternoon. And good afternoon to the griffier. Good afternoon to the members of Parliament. And good afternoon to those in the Tribune and all those who are listening to us by way of whichever medium. I would like to say good afternoon to our Acting Secretary General, Mr. Shigimoto, to the Head of Department of Culture, Ms. Clara Reyes, to the Head of the Department of Sport, Ms. Junelle Richardson, and the Cabinet Staff Advisor, Ms. Duporte, Camille Duporte. Madam Chair, the agenda point this afternoon, discussion with the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Sport regarding ideas for improvement. There's one, further development and legislation. That is the departure point from which I have prepared a presentation for the members of Parliament. So the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sports, which exists of 4 departments: the Department of Education, the Department of Culture, the Department of Youth, and the Department of Sport, also have 6 divisions, and we have depart from the part of the 4 departments. So here my presentation to the members of Parliament. I will start with education, and then culture, then youth, and then sport. The ongoing initiatives for improvements in education find their basis in the Ministry's 2016-2026 strategic plan. The strategic ambition related to education, the education sector, is that we will ensure that there are ample opportunities for the people of Sint Maarten to be lifelong learners, unquote. To realize this ambition, several reforms are being introduced to strengthen the system and enhance learner outcomes. 1, transform, monitor, and evaluate the education system so that students leaving the formal education sector possesses the required knowledge for continued education, employment, or entrepreneurship. 2, digitalize the education system in accordance with the changing technology in the world so that students can learn through big data, social media, and digital teaching methods. 3, ensure that teachers and staff have the competencies to teach and coach in accordance with innovative and digital teaching methods. 4, provide support to students to assist them in achieving their full potential and development, and develop the required knowledge and competencies, and provide the required infrastructure and resources to support the educational process and students in their learning process. There are many developments in education. As you are aware, the Ministry of Education recently established its position related to the Sint Maarten Vocational Training School. There are plans to build another secondary school. There are collaborations across the 4 ministries in the kingdom to improve the transition of students into higher education in the Netherlands. Significant investments have been made in the ITC infrastructure in public education, and the professional development program has been expanded into special education certification. Another significant development is the outcome of the education review. The members of Parliament and the community is aware that Sint Maarten and the Netherlands signed an agreement on December 2022 regarding liquidity support. The conditions for eligibility for support were elaborated in the country reform package. Measure G1 of the Sint Maarten Country Reform Package addresses educational issues and prescribe a review of the entire education system. The final report of the education review was delivered to the ministry in October 2022. It recommended prioritizing 2 plans of action. 1, improving the alignment between education and labor market, hospitality training, and teacher training, and strengthening the system in which education operates. Budgetary system, governance, legislation, and school repairs. Based on the findings of the comparative analysis, the Department of Education determined that the 2 proposed priority areas generally fall in line with the ongoing work of the ministry. However, it was apparent that there was a need for the scope of the plans of action to be broadened. All the recommendations can be grouped into 3 areas which will be further outlined in a plan of approach towards the plan of action. The 3 main areas include strengthening the system in which education operates, which are recommendation 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10. This is related to developing a mature governance structure, ensuring up-to-date and adequate legislation, organizing an efficient budgetary system, strengthening financial accountability, and analyzing inefficiencies in the education system. The second main area relates to providing a continuous learning path, recommendations 2, 3, and 4. This is related to improving the educational process, providing a continuous learning path, and enhancing the connection between education and the labor market. And the third main area relates to infrastructure that relates to recommendation 1 and 9. This is related to establishing a reliable and sustainable data registration system for key figures and guaranteeing the basic conditions for good education, particularly as it relates to educational facilities. The ministry, in accordance with its strategic plan, the governing program, the national development vision, and findings of the recent review, has plans for improvement in the following 3 areas that are expected to be realized within the coming months and years. Firstly, the ministry plans to improve the system in which education operates. To achieve this, a focus will be placed on finance and governance. Plans related to regulating the school busing system, improving the funding of primary, secondary, and advanced vocational education, and improving the funding of higher education will be executed. In terms of governance, plans to strengthen the role of the Inspectorate of Education and school boards will be executed. Secondly, the ministry has plans to improve the continuous learning path through the formal education system. To achieve this, the focus will be placed on implementing reforms, improving student outcomes, and improving the teacher profession. The plans related to the implementing reforms include implementation of language policy, reviewing of the FBE, and also the secondary education reform, establishment of the ROA, and introduction of policy for accreditation of higher education programs. Plans related to improving student outcomes include implementation of special needs policy, assessment of learning outcomes through international and standardized assessment in primary and secondary education. And the plans related to improving teaching profession include expansion of professional development program to include ongoing professional training and certification, framework for requirements for ongoing professional education, reviewing the career line of education professionals, and reviewing the function book for education and compensation for education professionals. Thirdly, the ministry has plans to improve educational infrastructure. To achieve this, the focus will be placed on digitizing educational facilities and materials. Plans for digitization include implementing an education management information system and digitization of schools. Plans related to infrastructure include improving educational facilities and material. The ministry legislative agenda for education consists of several pieces of legislation and regulations at various phases of development. As you are aware, the Ordinance on Higher Education, which seeks to establish the regulatory framework for the delivery of higher education, is now before Parliament for ratification. The ministry has also completed the draft ordinance for education supervision. The draft law, which seeks to establish the regulatory framework related to the supervision of education by the Inspectorate of Education, on behalf of the Minister of Education, also seeks to modernize the primary and secondary education laws by making required amendments. The draft law on education supervision with the amendment to the primary and secondary education ordinances is now before the Council of Advice for review. The ministry is also in the process of developing and seeking to amend or establish several national decrees for the education sector. The most advanced of the 4 national decrees is the National Decree for Study Financing, which is currently before the Council of Advice. The ministry anticipates the ratification of this national decree in the coming weeks. The ministry is also in the process of drafting the national decree for the funding of higher education. Consultations are expected to begin in the coming months. The review of the lump sum system, which is an integral part of the national decree for funding of education, is ongoing. The review is on. The review findings will inform amendments to the national decree for the funding of education in 2024. Lastly, in the coming months, the ministry will embark on the drafting of the national decree for education supervision, which will seek to establish the assessment framework to be used by the Inspectorate of Education. This brings me to the end of my prepared presentation related to education improvement and the legislative agenda. I would like to close this part of my presentation by indicating that improvements in education continue to be at the forefront of the policy agenda of the ministry. These improvements are part of the ministry's strategic ambition and are in tandem with the recommendations coming out of the recent education review. I will now go over to the Department of Culture.
Minister, I would like to interject, and I would like to give the floor to the members of Parliament, and I believe it will flow a little bit easier if we do it per sector, if you don't mind.
That would, I believe, that could be challenging because we would then have to limit the questions directly to maybe only education and then only culture, and then I believe if
Okay, so then you can continue, Minister. Continue.
The Department of Culture. Culture confidence has been the steady pace and trajectory since 2018 with which the Department of Culture has engaged in. However, it is midway through 2021 that the name for the process has been identified. The cultural confidence to own the legacy bestowed upon us from the older heads. To put an infrastructure in place that supports their legacy and lay the blocks for our descendants. To celebrate the legacy that lays the foundation for economic success at home and globally, we would use our talents, our creativity, our ingenuity, and innovations that are part and parcel of the voice that distinguishes to give us true prosperity and transformation via cultural confidence. Diversification and expression under one pillar economy can only happen when we exhibit the cultural confidence of the tangible and intangible cultural heritage. The words cultural confidence not only celebrate the traditions and intellect of our elders that have built this nation, but also a platform for the innovations from the contemporary voices of the youth. Through cultural traditions, we inherit the intellectual continuum of ancestors that lay foundations for developing innovations to step onto the world stage. What does cultural confidence mean for Sint Maarten or Sint Maarten, Swaliga, Kwalichi, or Sint Maarten? It means the confidence to trust that we are capable to produce levels of excellence in multiple areas and domains. Excellence in arts, in sports, in industry, in business, and in entrepreneurship, also excellence in science and agriculture. Not just the excellence, but excellence that lead to economic fruition and sustainability. Developing content for commerce, brands in Maarten. The department trajectory for introduction of culture creative industry remain in place as a vehicle for cultural industry development. Having this vehicle in place elevates and gives directions to the culture department. The culture creative industry, as introduced in 2018, remains the vehicle that the Department of Culture will utilize for cultural economic solvency. The Arranged Economy 2001, written by Felipe Batrego Restrepo, even more clearly expressed the link between culture and economy by giving a blueprint for economic success totally and wholly derived from the cultural tradition and artistic expression of a people as the economic catalyst for sustainability for the Caribbean. The four main sectors distinguished in the creative economy are 1, art, 2, heritage, 3, media, and 4, creative services. The creative economy built on the premises of, and I quote, activities relying on the input of human creativity to produce economic, societal, and symbolic value throughout the links of creation, production, dissemination, and consumption, end quote. This is as relevant today in 2023 as it was in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. While the department is on track with engagement in the culture creative industry, each of the 4 pillars is in urgent need of inventorizing and defining. To that effect, the department will focus on 2 pillars for the engagement in 2023. Those 2 pillars are art and heritage. There will be multiple opportunities for cross-platforming as each pillar is interconnected with the other. However, emphasis in 2023 will be focused on creating heritage content for schools, after-school programs, and cultural stakeholders. The urgency Sint Maarten faces is that we have reached a phase of critical need for heritage harness. The whom we are, what we are, and the why we are can be summarized under the discipline-based arts education paradigm. The culture creative industry is heavily dependent on establishing the presence of us, our history, the documentation of history, oral history, and also to take inventory of available content and distribute to the public. Specifically, the department has introduced the Cultural Creative Industry concept and annually organizes the Culture Creative Industry Forum. As part of its mandate to further and safeguard the cultural heritage of Sint Maarten, the department has created the annual SAGE Awards. These and the cooperation with SHTA and SMILE, the participation in the Career Fair, Sports, Culture, and Health Expo are part of the department multi-annual plans laid down in its year plans. In support of creating a legacy cemented in legislation to ensure continuity of cultural confidence, the department is steadfast in its approach to creating the policies and the necessary legislation that will ensure the continuity of our heritage with the necessary legal underpinning. And then I go to the Department of Youth. The goal of the Department of Youth is that all youth in Sint Maarten will achieve a healthy and wholesome development, equipped with knowledge and skills to reach their full potential and contribute to the advancement of Sint Maarten. To achieve the goal of the Department of Youth, 6 clusters are formulated. 1, civil rights and freedoms, family life and alternative care, education and labor, social welfare and health, sports, culture and leisure, and number 6, special protection measures. A strategic objective was formulated for each pillar to give direction to policies, legislation, and services that need to be in place to ensure the best outcomes for the youth. The government has an integrated approach for the youth sector. Supplementary activities from other ministries are also required to aid in the development of youth in their respective fields. The international obligation following the International Treaty of the Rights of the Child supersedes the ministry. In order to accomplish the government's goal, interministerial cooperation is a critical factor. Therefore, the promotion of inter and national collaboration on all community levels is essential. As the advocate of the Convention of the Right of the Child, the department will facilitate and support the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Sports, the other ministries, and executive bodies in the successful achievement of youth-related goals according to the Convention of the Right of the Child. The Department of Youth will be focusing on realigning youth policy to amplify the youth sector by laying the foundation for holistic youth development by 1, establishing structures and institutions that give priority to children's perspective, strengthening capacities of government structures and institutions, institutionalizing accountability and mechanism, supporting legislative reforms, and ensuring child-friendly services. To lay the foundation for efficient youth development, necessary prerequisites should be in place to reach the goal of the government. The following measures and tools and structures must be in place to execute, monitor, and evaluate youth development. 1, establishing structures and/or institution. Established an interministerial committee. It is advised that all ministries involved directly with the development of youth are represented in the committee, as well as youth parliament with a representative. Additionally, all relevant ministries will work more closely together in order to ensure that relevant youth issues are incorporated in the annual department plans and be addressed efficiently. In collaboration with the Ministry of ECYS and Justice, a concept manual was drafted for the establishment of the National Child Protection Platform, which is in the approval process. The ministerial regulation for the official establishment of the National Child Protection Platform is being drafted. It has been noted since the continuation change that the formation plan has not incorporated sufficient FTEs, and that has to do with the expansion of the youth department to execute core tasks for the department. When it comes to strengthening capacities of government and structures and institutions, we have youth mainstreaming. Youth mainstreaming is a twofold strategy for pursuing youth development. It involves ensuring that the youth is reflected in policy and project stages on an interministerial level, and thus ensuring there are specific projects addressing youth. Together, these add up to a youth-responsive approach, capacity building on youth mainstreaming, designation of youth mainstreaming focal points within each department/division, and also integration of youth mainstreaming in planning, budgeting, monitoring, and evaluation procedures. In collaboration with UNICEF Netherlands, the Youth Participation Initiative training is being developed. This is a training for professionals with models regarding meaningful youth participation in policy and project stages. The strengthening the capacity of the Department of Youth is to ensure the department is able to carry out its core tasks pertaining to policy development, planning, administration, and oversight function. Ensuring child-friendly services. The re-implementation of the youth desk. The youth desk is a central point where the youth can obtain information on various topics and or by referral. All execution programs from the Department of Youth will be coordinated via Youth Desk. The training and or information sessions will be held with the purpose to enhance or learn new skills and increase the knowledge of the youth in specific areas. In collaboration with UNICEF Netherlands, a concept note was developed for the function of the youth desk, and the manual is being drafted. The physical location is being renovated to suit the necessities. Measures and tools. The creation of the National Youth Monitor is an essential tool that will be used to gather data on all areas of development related to children and youth. The monitor will allow the tracking of progress and effectiveness of interventions and policies. The National Youth Monitor should at least consist of the following domains: the demographics of the population, health, education, participation, living environment, leisure, employment, and safety. Supporting legislative reform, the Youth Act. There is a need for a legal framework to regulate youth care services for youth and families in need of guidance. The Youth Care Act will ensure that qualitative care is made available to youth and their parents. Also, a better synchronization of efforts can be achieved in a currently fragmented care system. National Decree for Daycares. Based on research, Sint Maarten development of a sustainable and equitable funding model for daycare and after-school programs was executed last year in combination with UNICEF Netherlands. An action plan was drafted. The priority recommendations is being worked on in collaboration with the Ministry of ECYS. The updating of the laws, the early childhood development policy framework, and the development of minimal standards and implementation plans are in progress. I now come to the Department of Sports, the last one. As outlined within our strategic ambitions 2016-2026, the following objectives highlight the current areas of focus for the department. Facilitate the required sports environment, infrastructure, facilities, and resources in accordance with set inter- and national qualitative standards. Within the sport facilities, we are seeking to further develop our sport facilities and encourage the utilization of public spaces for sports and fitness. Specifically for Raoul Illich Sport Complex, the football field and the athletic tracks are due to be replaced through the approval of capital investments. For the Raoul Illich Sports Complex and the John Cooper Hussel Lake Ballpark and the L.B. Scott Sports Auditorium and Melford Hazel, these facilities are due to be repaired through NRPB and Trust Fund. The next objectives relate to ethics, values, and moral development. With this objective, we are engaging with the sports organizations in the development of their child protection policies based on our developed guidelines. Training for coaches will also be developed and executed. Within the objective that relates to media, we are currently in discussion with local organizations to increase on the coverage of our athletes and organizations locally and internationally. We have also increased the engagement on our Facebook page through the increase in sports. We are utilizing government platforms more often, and we have created a brochure which indicates the contact information for all organizations on the island, all sports organizations. The objective that relates to scholarship/study financing. We are promoting access to study financing and training opportunities to athletes and sport organizations. During this year, support has been given to athletes for training camps and to contribute to their attendance at college programs. Through the partnership with Study Finance, athletes also receive funding through study financing in the region. With the objectives that relate to households/companies, we aim to encourage sports participation. We are also currently developing guidelines that assist companies in encouraging physical activity in the workplace. The Sports Association objective. We are currently developing a sports administration manual that would assist volunteers in the management of their organizations. The department currently issues annual subsidies to Little League Association for a coach in softball and baseball, and the National Sport Institute for Facility Maintenance and Sport Execution. Incidental subsidies, in accordance with Subsidy Program of Requirements policy, are issued to sports organizations and persons for trainings, travel, tournaments, hosting, and participation. And sports scholarships are issued for athletes training, school attendance, and training camps. Where it pertains to sports policies and legislation, we are currently in various stages with the following. 1 cent per liter gas/diesel. The process for the development of legislation has started. We are engaging with a legislative writer, and we have requested the assistance of SOAB with this. Child safeguarding in sports guidelines. The document is in its final stage of development and will be sent on for approval within short. Sports facility policy. The policy was approved in 2021. The first phase of implementation was completed with the installation of the Boardwalk Sports Park and the extension of the Belvedere Park. We are currently in discussion with the Simpson Bay Community Council regarding the installation of the last piece of equipment purchased. We are seeking to implement further aspects of the policy and the activation plan, including water stations, signage for riders, and the further activation of policies, public spaces for volleyball and football. Madam Chair, this brings me to the end of the presentation, and I look forward to any questions or queries. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Samuel. I now look to the floor And I gave the floor to MP Sarah Westcott Williams. You have the floor.
Oh, I'm first, Madam Chair Lady. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and thanks to the Minister for his presentation on the different subjects and areas falling under his ministry. Madam Chair Lady, under the theme of bringing legalities in line with realities, I have, first of all, a general question for the Minister. And it has to do, Minister, with your decision to move the exam dates for foundation-based education. And while, of course, that discussion could go on forever in terms of the pros and cons to this decision by the Ministry of ECYS, what surprises me is the response of the Prime Minister to this decision, prompting me to ask whether this could possibly mean a change again in the date. That's my question. The Prime Minister, for those who might have not yet taken note of her response, stated that this decision was not communicated to the other members of the COM, for one. Secondly, that now the Prime Minister will attempt to get, and I'm paraphrasing, to get responses as to the reasons why from the ministry. So making it seem, in my opinion, and the opinion of many who have read the response of the Prime Minister to this particular matter, whether now this in itself is going to become a question, an issue, back and forth. Yeah, maybe we move it. No, no, it's not going to be moved. Put it back to where it was, etc. So, how does the Minister of ECYS view the response to his decision on moving the date of the FB exams with a week, I believe it was? So how does the Minister view the Prime Minister's response? And can that possibly mean that they will be changed again, is my question. On the matter of dates in education, dates that could have an effect on our education system, of course, we all have taken note that the next parliamentary elections for the country, St. Maarten, will be on the 11th of January, 2024, God spare our lives. And taking note of that, a decision by the COM, I now ask the Minister of ECYS whether this particular date and day has been thrown out, communicated to the education stakeholders. Now, why? Why would that have to be? Because for election, we make use of, for the greatest part, of schools. This means that the day before would have to be a day off from school, the day of election would have to be a day off from school, and the day after, because they have to prepare, have election, dismantle. Unless the minister have another idea how that process will go, and then I would await to hear it. As a side note to that is the fact that on that date, the 11th of January 2024, from what I've understood, is a day when we have at least 5 big cruise ships visiting St. Maarten. But don't mind, I don't want the answer to the economic part of it, but I would like the minister to indicate his viewpoint with respect to the schools and whether that has been. Now, yeah, of course, we count 1, 2, 3, and then the spin will start. But nevertheless, it will always be 2 days, unless you do it before a weekend, because you have to prepare. You have to have the election and then unless it's before a Saturday or Sunday that it can take place, you would have another day. So concretely, has this particular date been thrown out to the schools, et cetera, et cetera? So that's my first question. Sticking with education for now, are there measuring tools in the Education Strategic Plan 2016-2026, and considering that we're beyond 6 years into that plan, that my question is, are there measuring tools, like after 2 years you will see where you have gone with this part, that part, or the other part? And if such has been done, if this can be shared. It's one thing to have an educational strategic plan, but are we measuring our progress or lack of such in any way? Then, thirdly, under the topic of education, and the minister briefly referred to it, and that being the afternoon school programs, which I firstly want to tie into the issue of school meals. School meals. And is there an overall vision for this by the ministry? Of course, all help that can be given is welcomed. I commend whoever takes it up once it is not politicized. I commend all those who are assisting in this matter, but other than that, I would like to know the minister's view, and I tie it into the issue of the afternoon school programs. I remember during the budget debate when I asked for a cut in, I asked for explanation as to the cut in some of the budget items, especially where afternoon programs are concerned. The minister indicated that, and I paraphrase, the programs could not have been carried out as envisioned due to the cuts in the budget. So where do we stand today as far as the issue? And when I talk about these issues, I'm not talking about it from one particular school, overall. So how is the afternoon school, after school programs, how is that working on St. Maarten? I also want to address, like we're talking still education, the issue of safety. Now, I can't say years, I don't think it's that long, but this issue of safety in our school system has been one of ongoing concern. Of course, when we see images like we have seen them this week, the matter surfaces very much so once again. But I believe that the minister might have been on the other side, so actually on this side, when a motion was passed about a plan to be made in conjunction with the community police officers as far as school safety is concerned. Where is that today? Where is that whole approach and collaboration and cooperation? Where is that today? Again, I want to commend now the police organization on St. Maarten for their information, their cautioning, their admonition to the people of St. Maarten. I believe that's extremely important. But if we, again, seek to bring legalities in line with realities, then my question would be what's happening on the ground concretely, where the matter of safety for our children and teachers is concerned. Madam Chair Lady, with your indulgence, I continue under the topic of culture. And my question is the Minister of ECYS aware of the letter from the Prime Minister to all government-owned companies regarding the employment of, and now I quote from that letter, St. Maarteners / locals. Now, firstly, I need to inform this minister that based on that letter, I have sent questions to the Prime Minister to better explain what the Prime Minister means. Because, well, firstly, no, let me state. Firstly, I ask, because I don't know, whether this particular letter about employing St. Martiners, locals, at government-owned companies, whether it has been sent to all government-owned companies, is my question. Two, I have sent these questions, by the way, Minister, to the Prime Minister as well as the Minister of Labor. I also wanted to know if the government, and here's where this minister comes into the picture, whether the government itself has some, I don't want to call it a policy, but something to go by in determining who is a St. Martiner and a local. It's the government used this word to the government-owned companies, and the government, in the person of the Prime Minister, is telling government-owned companies to institute a policy to employ St. Martiners and locals, St. Martiner, local, in managerial positions in government-owned companies. Now, the first reaction would be, hooray! But what are the companies to do with that? Should not the government have stated, this is my policy on employment, on action regarding St. Martiners and locals in the labor market, in the highest positions at government-owned companies, and then ask government-owned companies to comply. So, from a cultural perspective, what is this minister's vision on that? Is the minister aware of this letter by the Prime Minister? How does he view it? Where can that, if within the cultural organization, where can I find something to go by where that letter is concerned? Then I want to ask this minister, who's in charge of media. This minister is in charge of media. There is a media law that is going a little back and forth. And again, the ministers, the chairperson of the Council of Ministers made a statement with respect to the media, and in particular radio stations, as far as political advertising is concerned. Is the minister, and I must add, stated that this is the personal opinion of the Prime Minister. Where does the Ministry of ECYS stand on the matter of a media law or not? Should it be, should it not be? And where does the ministry stand on the issue of restrictions as far as radio stations and charges are concerned when it comes to political parties and or politicians, is my question. Madam Chair Lady, thirdly, I want to go to youth. And the many issues, not the many issues, the many things we have seen in the presentation by the minister regarding our youth. Clearly, the youth cannot be, youth issues cannot be addressed by only the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sports. And thus, my question is there some type of an integrated ministerial group as far as youth matters is concerned? If so, if there is such an organization, what is its task, one, and if there is one and they have a task, in how far have they done anything concretely? And then I want to go to sports. I saw the many comments, statements, etc., with respect to not one, several of our athletes, and may I add, our artists, falling out of the boat somewhat, so not able to participate, especially internationally because of lack of funding and support. So there are several reports of these persons, and I asked the minister, through the chairlady of this commission, how can we ensure, because sports is a wide field, acting is a wide field. Many persons want to engage in sports, many persons want to engage in acting and performances. Not everybody is as successful as they would like to be. However, and this is my question to the minister, how can we ensure that potential, St. Martin potential in the area of sports, and then I also want to say in the area of actors and performers, how can we ensure that that potential is understood, acknowledged, recognized, and assisted? So for example, if I like a sport and I have a good story, could come to the ministry and I'm looking for support. And then we get a regular thing. We file a request, etc., according to the subsidy ordinance. But that doesn't mean that I am successful or will have success at what I would like to do. But we have some serious potential, growing potential on St. Martin, and how do we make sure that those persons do not fall between the cracks because of, yes, and according to the subsidy order, oh, but you don't have a plan, oh, but you're too late, oh, but you got to go to New Guinea, but you're too late. But New Guinea has a big thing going on, but our people who might have been able to participate in whatever is happening in New Guinea, they can't go because they don't have the support, etc. So how do we, to use a Dutch word, how do we vang that up? How do we, make sure that, no, they don't fall through the cracks? Because it's not a Sarah who thinks she could go and represent I don't know what somewhere just because I would want to, but that doesn't mean I can. But you have those who want to and who can. And how do we make sure that those persons get assisted? So, Madam Chair Lady, this is the kind of debate I would like to have with the minister on the issues regarding education, regarding culture, regarding youth, and regarding sports. And I thank you.
Thank you, MP Westcott. I will now take a 3-minute break. Meeting adjourned for 3 minutes. We now go over to MP Rolando Bryson. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to you, the Secretary General, my colleagues, and the Honorable Minister here with us today, as well as the support staff and those viewing this meeting. Madam Chair, I definitely took note of the presentation and many plans and policies and so on, legislative agenda, most of it, or if not all, that I could agree with. But in looking at that, my concern, or the question that keeps coming up when I see a certain, okay, we need to expand the FTE, we need to, you know, broaden the ability to subsidize and so on, I start to say, is this plan in line with the funding that is going to be provided to the Ministry of Education? Because there's two ministries, or in particular departments, that always get the brunt of cuts. One is the Ministry of Tourism, and two is the Ministry of ECYS. And I've always, you know, via amendments, you know, we've tried to kind of combat that legislatively, so to speak, to say, no, let's rebalance some of those things, especially in tourism and education, which I think are the two key components, because those two together combine to provide for everything within our country. There is no finance, there is no safe society, there is no health system if your people are not educated, and there's no economy. They're both interlinked. And yet we continuously, tourism department will come here and present many plans for what we want to do for marketing. The ECYS has presented various plans for education, culture, youth, and sports. My question to the minister is, normally by the May 1st deadline, the ministry presented budget to the Council of Ministers in terms of, or around that period, let me don't say deadline, but around May. It is typical that the government and the ministries present what they believe they should be provided to be able to execute their needs. The budget is probably, I guess, going through its legislative process, but I know that the Parliament will receive the budget in its final form. But in what is presented, the sort of wish list that comes from the ministry, is that in line with what we were presented here today? If we have plans, and I would say we're now at the end of 2023, so much of these plans are being planned to be implemented from 2024, then that means that the 2024 budget should have some provisions for this. So I would like to know generally, from a budgetary perspective, are we going to afford these things? And also, you know, with the minister, we've sat together with the cinema ordinance to find that's maybe one way where we may be able to bring some funds towards culture and the performing arts. The 1 cent per liter is another action that we're seeing. How can we bring more funds to it? What other methods has the ministry come up with to actually bring more funds? And I do think that in many jurisdictions, including in the Netherlands, similarly that is done with the subsidizing of school institutions. There's also sub-government entities that are normally created that are able to do more of a sort of public-private partnership to be able to help fund these things. I know the minister has spoken many times over the years about a cricket stadium for Sint Maarten. These are things that require investment that I don't think the government can do alone. So where are we going, when and how are we going to start to combine the efforts of the government with the private sector, who the government on its own is unable to do it, the private sector on their own are unable to do it, but if the efforts of the private sector, at least the businessmen and sports enthusiasts that I've spoken to, and based on the plans that I see the minister presenting, to me, there is a viable option for a public-private manner in finally realizing not just a cricket stadium, but perhaps a multi-purpose state-of-the-art sports facility for Sint Maarten. It's long overdue, and it's something that I truly believe is important, both from the local sports perspective, but from a sports tourism perspective. I always say people want an excuse to come to Sint Maarten. It's one of the most unique, most attractive destinations, and sometimes you have to give them a reason more than marketing. And events tend to be one of the best ways to attract people to Sint Maarten. You can do conferences, you can do concerts, but you can also do sporting events. And sporting events can be a whole new market that Sint Maarten should be tapping into, but we do not have the facilities. So what is the plan or the sentiments from the ministry? I've not heard so much about that aspect of it. Not just the sports facilities, which are important to develop our own sports, but I'm sure our own athletes would also enjoy being able to finally use really state-of-the-art, international standard sports facilities in our country. Also, I did also, in looking at the aspect of culture, and it was interesting that it was brought up a little bit earlier in terms of within the presentation, in terms of embracing our culture and that cultural identity. And that was going to be one of my questions, maybe not so much in the frame it was posed earlier in the government saying, and indeed, I will agree, if you say Sint Maarteners and locals, well then you have to provide that definition. So I actually had that question prepared in terms of from the cultural identity perspective, because I've been looking at this situation in terms of defining a Sint Maartener for quite some time. And it's interesting because it's such a polarizing topic within the community, because the sentiment is that most people don't want to be left out. That's the sentiment that you get from many people, that will the definition of a Sint Maartener finally being able to define what constitutes a Sint Maartener mean that some people who feel they're Sint Maarteners will be left out. But I don't think we should be afraid of that. Anguilla and other British territories have found ways to be able to define the Anguillan and the belonger, for example. Perhaps that's where we have to go. And the three components that tend to add up to being able to define the Sint Maartener is the cultural aspect, the administrative aspect, so who is registered and how long they have to be registered and so on, and place of birth and so on, and of course the judicial aspect to ensure that within our civil system that definition can fit. But from the cultural aspect, I would like to hear from the ministry. I have posed those questions to the Ministry of General Affairs and Justice, but I would like to hear from the Ministry of Culture. Help me and help the Parliament find the right direction to really getting ourselves in the direction of being able to define whether we should have belongers, Sint Maarteners, and make it clear who are those that should have that. Because if you look at, for example, our system of sole proprietorship, it is said that Sint Maarteners are the ones that can enjoy getting a sole proprietorship at the Chamber of Commerce. There is a loose definition, but there is a criteria. Do I agree that that's the criteria of a Sint Maartener? Probably not, but I think it includes many Sint Maarteners. But nonetheless, the cultural component is very important. Using the indigenous definition will probably not work for a country like Sint Maarten, because many of us are not indigenous from the perspective of the pre-colonial time, which was the Arawaks, the natives back then. So you have to incorporate the descendants of slaves. You then have to also incorporate the development of Sint Maarten. There was an interesting book, and I lost it here in my notes, that I read that kind of identified, I believe it was 1973 or 63, one of the years, don't quote me on that. But I'll find the book, Minister, and I will send it to you. Because there is a particular year where Sint Maarten went through a very interesting transition, that there were several things happened that year that really caused an influx in a large number of people really calling Sint Maarten their home. And that formed the basis for the culture that we live today. So that would be maybe something also I would like to get the perspective from the Ministry of Culture on that, and contribute towards that discussion and bring it to the forefront without any fear of any sort of any person feeling that this is a definition or not, because it is a question we also have to go back to the people with. Finally, I think there's another aspect that I would like to hear about that maybe I missed in the presentation, but the component of esports. As you know, Madam Chair, the Parliament of Sint Maarten did pass a motion recognizing esports as a sport, and then asking the Ministry of Sports whether they will consider at some point being able to develop that aspect of sports. I myself have tried we do monthly tournaments, now going to shift to bi-weekly. We've had people that traveled abroad. We had a local that placed top 16 internationally in the Capcom Cup. We have a lot of talent in St. Maarten within the realm of esports, and would be interesting to see esports also integrated into the plans of the ministry as presented today. If that can be some sort of addendum and some sort of statement with regards to esports, what are the possibilities of esports groups, federations, associations being able to approach the Ministry of Sports to be able to get support to not just build the local grassroots scene like we call it, but also to be able to compete internationally, like events all around the world that have large prizes and bring a lot of attention to the country where the athlete, the e-athlete, has come from. Finally, also similar to the budget, but more in terms of the capital investments. A lot of the plans that we see presented, I believe they are tied to the capital investments that were approved by the Parliament, and I believe they were approved by the Kingdom Council of Ministers, etc. How far is that process for the Ministry of ECYS to get its capital investment projects off the ground, so that this will finally be where, at least for those of us that voted for the budget and understood the importance of being able to provide those investments, that now these projects like schools, sports facilities and so on, that those are coming along. At least how far are you with the advisory process, that those advices are being ready, so that once the funding is ready, we don't then have to go into an advice process. I'm hoping that the minister has come along in terms of that direction. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Bryson. I now give the floor to MP Gumbs. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to you, my colleagues, the Minister and his support staff, and those joining us. Madam Chair, a lot of the topics that were up for discussion have been pretty much asked and questioned already, but for me, I wanted to just kind of dive in on something the Minister said regarding the developments that so far have been made regarding significant investments made in ICT infrastructure in the public schools. I just wanted to ask through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister if he could elaborate or specify at least 5 of the significant upgrades that have been made. Because, you know, putting devices in a school is not just that's not an ICT infrastructure upgrade. When we toured the Martin Luther King Jr. School, as well as even Genevieve the Weaver, there were clear-cut examples of incorrect cabling being used for internet connections, poor setups regarding digital infrastructure at the schools, which can lead to service interruptions and stutters, which is no fun for teachers or students. It's also pretty common to hear, in my experience anyway, complaints about service dead zones and drops, which, you know, again, can be attributed to poor cabling. So I just want to know if any work has been done on, you know, network design, mapping, laying out Cat6 shielded cabling for these, because that is infrastructure essentially. So it just at least 5 of the critical ICT upgrades that have been made to the public schools, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Gumbs. I now give the floor to MP Pontiflet.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to my colleagues, Secretary General, our Minister of ECYS, Dr. Anders Rudolph Samuel, and his support staff, persons who are viewing. Madam Chair, I listened to the presentation from the Minister, and what keeps coming to my memory is the fact that there is so much to be done when there was so much that has not been done in the past. So it puts pressure now, Madam Chair, on those who are there to fix the things that have been neglected over the many, many years. Having said it, Madam Chair, I will continue in this forum to express my concern as it relates to the issue of our educational system, that, in all honesty, we have to agree it is not ours 100%. It is what have been given to us by the colonial powers. It is a system that we have worked with for many years. And in all honesty, I can say for a fact that it is not one that can be changed overnight. However, Madam Chair, I want to start to see where we truly do our utmost, and that will call again for stability so that when civil servants are going to plan and make their policies and so on, that it can continue, to see steps that are being taken towards us changing our curriculum to reflect who we are as a people. Because I know we're busy now with the higher education law, and it talks about Anglo-Saxon, and we know what Anglo-Saxon means. It is US, European, it's not us. It is not us. And I will dare say now, Madam Chair, that I will not be surprised if you'll find that most of today, our students, our children, are coming to the understanding that what is being taught to them, it is actually not totally true. Columbus discovered America. Nonsense. And Madam Chair, I think it is time now that we really start to look to see exactly what it is and what is our culture, not one that has been adopted or taken over, because honestly, we are so brilliant as a people that even though it is not our system, we can still adapt and sometimes excel. But I think the time to adopt and excel is over. It is time to change and reflect exactly who we are, because once you know who you are, then you're better able to put all effort into what it is you ought to do. So, Madam Chair, with all respect and understanding, I know, when I say I know what it is that the Minister of ECYS is facing along with the staff and so on, is not easy. But if we really want to become an independent people in the future, we got to start now to put that foundation in place, because it also ties into our culture as who we are. Now, Madam Chair, something I forgot to say in the initial stage has to do with the beautiful island of Curacao. As some of you might know, they became international champs, I believe, for the second consecutive year. And I had the privilege of looking at the game, and I enjoyed it very much. But why do I mention that? You get out what you put in. You get out what you put in. St. Maarten is full of raw talent, filled with raw talent, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair. But the issue is we need to have the infrastructure in place in order to be able to invest in that raw talent that we have. And I know for a fact it wouldn't happen overnight, but definitely we must ensure that we have, and I like what my colleagues said, you need the necessary funding in order to do so. We have to start somewhere, Madam Chair, and I believe the time to start is now. So, Madam Chair, I'm looking forward to, there were questions asked to the Minister. I'm looking forward to hear the answers. But at the same time, I want us to understand that the matter of getting things done, yes, is public and private. And I would dare to say more so private, because when our athletes go abroad and they excel, it is business for the private sector first and foremost, of course, and it can turn into revenues for government. So having said that, Madam Chair, I thank you.
Thank you, MP Pantouflet. I give the floor to MP Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to everyone. I have two quick questions, Madam Chair, through you to the Minister. Minister, there's a huge capacity problem in the ministry. Most of the ministries are dealing with a lack of capacity, and that's a huge issue. I have said here a couple of times that we need creative ways to go about solving this capacity issue. It is beyond now putting how you call it? a post in a newspaper for a job. We have to create projects and hire project workers. Why? Because there is too much work to be done in too little hands. That is the reality. The minister mentioned, Madam Chair, that a legislative writer has been sought for the 1 cent on gasoline. I would like to know, for everything else that is going on in the ministry, are there other consultants working? For what projects maybe are more legislative writers being sought? So that there is an understanding that hopefully that help is being looked for in order to support those in the ministry, because that is what is necessary at this moment. The ministry, the staff needs help. Secondly, Madam Chair, in my opinion, the ministry, and this is me talking from experience, is extremely bureaucratic. Extremely. The Minister of ECYS mentioned in a very pragmatic way how he approached the problem. And so for me, when do we start to look at pragmatic ways at solving issues? The education review was done. A review on funding daycares, which is crucial, was done. At least now, I want to say more than 8 months. What is going to happen? What are the concrete steps that are going to happen now that the reviews are done? We keep doing research. We need action plans, and that is my question to the minister through you, Madam Chair, and that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Duncan. I look to the floor of Parliament. I see no MP George. MP Pontiflet, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I forgot a question, and maybe it was answered before. I apologize. The issue of the Housel Lake ballpark, I believe that lights were ordered for that. Have we received them, and when are they going to be placed at the Housel Lake ballpark? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Pontiflet. MP Westcott Williams.
Yes, thank you once again, Madam Chair Lady. And just a brief follow-up question, really. Can the minister indicate in any of his areas, education, culture, youth, sports, if there's any coordination, collaboration, sharing of resources when it comes to regional collaboration? So in any of his areas, is there that kind of coordination and collaboration? Why do I ask this? Because we're talking about education and whether education today is adaptable to our current situation, yes or no. And when I look at organizations such as the OECS and see what they are doing and the different textbooks that they are developing also for areas that are important to us. And in a case like that, why do we have to go and reinvent the wheel? And is my question, is there any such collaboration? And if there's not, I would strongly recommend to the minister that these be researched. It's not that difficult. And these organizations are looking at embracing others in the Caribbean, including St. Maarten, and I believe a lot can be had from that kind of cooperation and collaboration. Look at it in the area of youth health, Madam Chair Lady, where you have different programs ongoing, and it just would be a matter of taking these over and adjusting them, of course, to St. Maarten. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. I look to the floor. I see no further need. I will consult with the minister. We will adjourn for 2 minutes. Meeting adjourned. I have consulted with the minister regarding agenda point 1, and the minister would like to have 2 weeks to answer the questions posed by Parliament. And we will now continue and move on to agenda point 2. Agenda point 2 is a discussion with civil servants. Sorry?
Madam Chair, lady,
Yes,
if I may, on a
MP Westcott Williams.
Thank
have the
you.
floor.
If I may, on a point of order relating to your statement regarding the minister's response to these questions. And my question is, Madam Chair, lady, the issue of the moving of the FBE exam date is a critical issue. And I would appreciate if the minister can give some kind of indication regarding that, and in relation to the Prime Minister's statement. Is the possibility for changing it back on the books? That's what I would like to know, and we cannot wait, Madam Chair Lady, with all due respect, on 2 weeks to hear the answer to that. In fact, to none of them, but to that one in particular. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. I look to the minister. Minister, would you like to give a response to the Honorable Member of Parliament? You have the floor, Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would like to indicate to the Honorable Member of Parliament that even prior to statements being made by other persons, conversations were ongoing in order to explain the reason that the dates were set. So because in the light of that, I don't want to make any extra statements at the moment, and I will get back to the Member of Parliament and Parliament as soon as possible.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Minister. We now move on to agenda point 2. Agenda point 2 is the discussion with civil servants of the Ministry of ECYS regarding the establishment of a National Heritage Week, a plan regarding the creation of a cultural council, and the setting up of a multidisciplinary work group to review school curricula per the adopted motion number 1 of January 21st, 2022, IS 1206, 2021-2022, dated August 17, 2022. I now look to the minister. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon again to everyone. Madam Chair, the discussion with civil servants of the ministry regarding 3 things: the establishment of a National Heritage Week, the second one, plans regarding the creation of a culture council, and third, the setting up of a multidisciplinary work group to review school curricula. Madam Chair, when I look at the 3 agenda points, I can say to the members of Parliament, the third point, the setting up of a multidisciplinary work group to review the curricula for school curricula in regards to history and stuff like that. As it pertains to the creation of the multidisciplinary work group, the Division of Education Innovation has taken the lead by creating the terms of reference for a curriculum developer. And the reason we went that route is that you cannot start the plan without having the curriculum developer in-house. So I know that I think the terms of reference was already sent out. Am I correct, right? The terms of reference was sent out, and the persons who applied is being sorted out so that we can get a curriculum developer. And once a person has been engaged, the process of creating the work group will start. So there is where we are. The Department of Culture contribution will consist in vetting the material in the existing curricula and assist in acquiring the creation and creating the content. That is specifically in regards to that third point. And then the second point, plans regarding the creation of a culture council. with regards to the formation of the Culture Council, the Department of Culture has created a trajectory framework for the Culture Council detailing the mandatory steps, including profiles and the legislations that need to be created. And all of that is in this document. The problem is that it is an active document and we cannot give it out as yet to the members of Parliament. And then it brings me then to point 1 of agenda point 2, which talks about the establishment of a National Heritage Week. And that one I will go as follows. Tuesday, October 10th, 2023, marks the 13th anniversary of Country St. Maarten Day. The birth of a country, St. Maarten, on this day, which is named Constitutional Day. To mark this pivotal day in the history of St. Maarten, Constitutional Day, celebrated annually on the second Monday in October, will be observed this year on Monday, October 9th, commemorated with a grand national cultural festival that will feature the coming together of the multitude of nations, cultural groups that live, work, strive, flourish, and have St. Maarten, sweet St. Maarten, as their home. This coming together of people who have committed to this island nation creates the platform for community and continuity to deepen relations and embrace each other's experience, to work collectively, to continue to build solidarity among all St. Maarten citizens. The celebrations on the 13th anniversary of the birth of St. Maarten through the National Cultural Festival is an opportunity to showcase that which perpetuates the St. Maarten spirit, the spirit of jollification, which is the iconic tradition of coming together to build homes, to build community, to build nations. This jollification intercultural festival will feature an international cultural and traditional rich parade, a cultural showcase of enormous proportions, and of course, including a culinary event to complete the jollification. The Jollification Intercultural Festival will kick off the heritage season that will run from the 10th of October to the 11th of November 2023. The iconic St. Maarten Day Unity Day, a day set aside by founding fathers, Dr. Petty and Dr. Claudwati, to identify one day at which both our brethren from the north and of the south could come together collectively as one island nation to celebrate their oneness, to celebrate the unity and cultural tradition of what makes our island unique. It is the intention of linking both these two iconic days, Country St. Maarten Day and St. Maarten Unity Day, as the heritage season, which will feature a multitude of activities to celebrate the nature, the story of St. Maarten in an interdisciplinary festival that features poetry, dance, film, theater, all the various alterations of the creative, expressive voices, showcases on a multitude of platforms, the elements of a thriving cultural creative industry on St. Maarten. The schedule includes, but not limited to, the following events. Thus far are film, St. Maarten Festival, art walk, theatrical performances, dance performances, Moko Festival, Calypso Night, Poetry Night, Youth Night, Cultural Night, St. Martin Day/Unity Day, Sage Awards, and Brown Pelican Awards. On October 2023, so October 2023 will mark the pilot program of establishing the Heritage Season to eventually become an annual signature event. So when we look at the agenda point, it is indeed that we also from the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Sports is not only looking at a Heritage Week, but we are looking at a Heritage Season. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I look to the floor of Parliament to see if any of my colleagues would like to have the floor. MP Duncan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the Minister for this very good news. I just want to wish the Department of Culture and the Ministry success this year. Creating a heritage season cannot be easy, but I am excited to see all of the cultural activities and events that come up. I think it is an extremely important step for our people, and I look forward to attending the events. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Duncan. MP Westcott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I too want to thank the Minister for this presentation. In my opinion, it is quite clear in terms of actions and activities. But when I read some of the actions, I then want to take it back to the previous agenda point, and that is whether in the discussion regarding social cohesion, etc., and identity development, etc., has the discussion about a St. Martin / local, has that come up? And if so, what about it? So put aside for a moment until we get answers the reference to the Prime Minister's letter to which I referred under the previous agenda point, and I asked whether in the context of establishing these trajectories, whether whether that matter has come up. I do know for a fact, Madam Chair Lady, and I'll not pretend not to know, that during the tenure of the late Neville York, discussions, symposia were held with respect to this topic. And thus, I want to know if, as you now have this before you, if that matter has come up in any form or fashion, and if so, what was the outcome or the status of such? Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. I look to my colleagues. I see there are no colleagues who are wishing to have the floor. I now look to the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sports. Minister. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, at this moment, I don't have anything extra to add. I agree with the members of Parliament that the creation of a heritage season, and especially this time, is a new item on the books. But with the able bodies and the minds and the energy that we have in the ministry, and with all our stakeholders, we intend to really give St. Maarten what St. Maarten deserves.
Thank you, Minister. I would look to the floor to see if any of my colleagues would like to have the floor before we adjourn this meeting. MP Westcott Williams, you have the floor.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair Lady. And is the answer given by the Minister also the answer to my question regarding the matter of St. Martin / local, and whether in the context of this presentation and preparation, whether that has come up? Is that also the Minister's answer, that no answer can be given at this time?
Minister, you have the floor.
No, Madam Chair, thank you. In regards to the statement and the question that MP Westcott brought forward, in regards to, in the time of the late Neville York, if this matter came up, it is something that I will query with the organization and bring back an answer to Parliament.
Thank you, Minister. I look one final time to the members of Parliament to see if any one of you wishes to have the floor. I see no need. I too would like to take this opportunity to thank my colleagues here sitting from the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport for quite an extensive document that have been provided to us today, and congratulate Ms. Reyes on her upcoming heritage season, and also thank our, I would also like to thank our head of sports here who is present today as well, and all of the other members who have participated in such a document. Thank you all so much, and we look forward to the minister returning with the answers to the questions posed. I hereby adjourn this meeting. Meeting adjourned.